There are three kinds of people who end up working for the government. The first are lifers, bureaucrats by blood. You know the type. Dad worked in infrastructure, mom was in admin, and the whole family talks about pension benefits like it's religion. They know every form, every acronym, and they glide through security checkpoints like migrating birds. The second kind? The burnt-out idealists. Once upon a time, they wanted to make a difference. But somewhere along the line, the machine wore them down, turned their edges dull. Now they keep their heads low and just try to last till retirement. And then there's the third kind, me. Guys who stumble into government work not because they dreamed of it, but because it was the first solid lifeline tossed their way when the rest of their life started to fall apart. After my dad died, I quit my job. I'd been working sales for a logistics firm out east. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills. And then, one Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Just 2 rings. My mom was crying before I even answered. Cardiac arrest. No warning. Just gone. I took it hard. I moved back to British Columbia to help settle his affairs. Small town stuff, storage units, property taxes, insurance claims that felt like arguing with ghosts. I thought I'd take 6 months off, reset, maybe write again, like I used to. But instead, I found myself eating boxed macaroni and scanning government job boards at 3 a.m. because the silence in the house was louder than grief. And that's when I saw it. Administrative Liaison, Regional Missing Persons Division, low experience required, entry level, government benefits. Salary was barely above minimum wage, but it was stable. The job description was vague, something about case transition intake, interagency record management, and rural file review. I figured it meant pushing papers. I figured it would be boring. I was so incredibly wrong. The building didn't look like much. A squat concrete block hidden behind a highway on-ramp. No signage, no flags. The parking lot had exactly 17 spots, and I never saw more than 10 cars parked there. Inside, it smelled like old electronics and lukewarm printer toner. The lobby had plastic chairs, dusty floor plants, and a silent receptionist who never seemed to blink. Carol met me at the security door. She was maybe mid-50s, gray hair pulled back tight, dark blue cardigan like she'd worn it every day since the early 2000s. Her handshake was soft, but her grip was firm. "You'll be on the 5th floor," she said. "We handle long-term disappearances, mostly wilderness-related, backlogs and digitization. You won't have to interact with the public. Just keep the records moving and the database clean." I followed her through the elevators, trying not to breathe too loudly. The 5th floor was strange. Dim lighting. Not quite dark, but never bright enough to feel alive. Rows of cubicles with shoulder-high partitions, each just barely wide enough for a desk and a gray filing cabinet. No decorations, no chatter. Just the hum of fluorescent tubes and the constant clack of distant typing. "This'll be your spot," Carol said, pointing to the far corner. "Computer's already set up. Login info's in your inbox. Start with the red folders. They're flagged for migration. Let me know if anything needs escalation." I asked her what red folder meant. She just said, "You'll see." Then she walked away and never once looked back. The first few days were normal enough. Well, they felt normal. If normal meant being surrounded by people who never made eye contact, filing reports on people who vanished into the trees, and pretending the whole world made sense. The folders were physical, not digital. Actual manila folders with typed reports and sometimes handwritten notes from field agents, long since retired or, more often than not, deceased. Each one told a A story with no ending. A logger who left camp at dawn and never came back. A fisherman whose boat was found drifting in circles with the engine still idling. A teenager whose last text message read, "Something's watching me." It was eerie, sure, but I chalked it up to the nature of the job. Canada's West is massive. Trees taller than churches, lakes deeper than skyscrapers. People disappear here. It happens. But then came the anomalies. The first was the Benson report. It landed on my desk sometime mid-morning. Carol had dropped it off without a word. The folder was newer than most. Crisp corners, no fading. Inside were only 3 pages. 1 typed incident report, 1 interview transcript, and 1 photo that had clearly been Xeroxed from a Polaroid. The subject, Marianne Benson, 27 years old, freelance illustrator from Kelowna. Went missing in July 1998. Last seen camping near the North Thompson River. The witness? A trucker passing through the area around 5 a.m. He claimed he saw her tent from the road and something squatting next to it. He thought it might be a bear until it turned its head, too long, too narrow, and looked directly at his truck. Then the tent collapsed. By the time he turned his rig around and pulled over, the entire camp was gone. No tent, no gear, no footprints, no Benson. The final line of the report chilled me. Subject deemed unrecoverable. RDA protocol enacted. I didn't know what RDA protocol was. The acronym wasn't listed in any of the department glossaries, so I flagged it for internal lookup and moved on. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I dreamed of forests, empty tents, eyeshine from the tree line. Something coiled around tree trunks like it was made of mercury. The next morning, I found a post-it note on my monitor. Just 1 word. Don't. No signature. No handwriting I recognized. Just that word. Don't. I kept going. I couldn't help it. I've always had this thing, this impulse, where if you tell me not to look, it's the only thing I can see. So I kept pulling the red folders, and they kept getting stranger. One was about a park ranger who vanished mid-shift. Another about a couple hiking near Revelstoke whose dog came back to the ranger station alone, bloody and missing its teeth, but otherwise unharmed. Every file had 2 things in common. A witness report that mentioned something reptilian, scales, slitted eyes, flicking tongues, inhuman movement. A red stamp reading, RDA protocol enacted. I started keeping a private list. That's when I noticed the names. One day, I opened a file and nearly dropped it. The subject's name was Thomas Dalmore, my high school gym teacher. I remembered him vividly. He'd vanished during a backcountry hunting trip in '98. Everyone said he was probably eaten by a bear. The news barely covered it. But here was the report, red stamped. RDA protocol. Another day, it was Amber Keller. She used to work at the corner coffee shop when I was 16. Gone in 2001. Said to have run away. Red stamp. And then, Patrick Dalmore, my uncle. I stared at that folder for a long time. He went missing when I was a kid. Out camping near the Kootenays. They said it was a cougar. My dad never believed that. He stopped talking about Patrick after that year, like the silence would seal the grief. But the report said otherwise. Subject observed entering unclassified burrow formation at 0412 hours. Tracked by drone until visual contact lost. Secondary scout reports glinting movement within boreal substrate. No human remains recovered. RDA protocol finalized. It didn't feel real, like the folder had been conjured just to mess with me. But the paper smelled old. The ink had bled from time. The pages were real. The implications were not. The thing about obsession is you never know when it starts. Not really. There's no line you cross, no blinking red light in your brain that says, "Warning, you're falling into something you won't come back from." It's slow, creeping, like a fog rolling in over the lake at dusk, hiding the shore one branch at a time until you look up and realize you can't see the bank at all. That's what it was like with the RDA cases. I told myself I was just doing my job, flagging anomalies, following the paper trail. But something inside me had cracked open the moment I saw my uncle's name. And once that happened, the flood came. I stopped working on anything else. I used my nights and weekends to build a hidden archive, physical and digital. I'd bring folders home, scan them with a phone I kept offline, then carefully return them the next day. I started sorting them by region, by incident type, by witness credibility. I even gave the whole thing a name. Protocol Red. It became my shadow job. At first, I thought maybe there were 30 or 40 RDA files total. An old protocol. Abandoned. Maybe some fringe unit that used to investigate cryptids or UFOs before the government cut their funding. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. By the end of the second month, I had 342 confirmed RDA-linked disappearances. Every single one included a reptilian witness account, and most of those witnesses had also gone missing, weeks, months, sometimes years later. Their names showed up in new RDA files. It was like a sickness, a pattern that hunted the pattern seekers. And then it escalated. It was a Tuesday when I first noticed the smell. Not the usual metallic one. That had become a background note, like the office was built over a scrapyard that nobody wanted to talk about. This one was different. Sweet. Damp. Something like rotting honey or overripe fruit left out in the sun. I smelled it the moment I walked into the records room. At first, I thought maybe something had leaked from the janitor's closet, but the smell was coming from behind the shelves, from the back wall. That's when I found the door. I'd never noticed it before. Not once in 8 weeks. It had no sign, no number. Just a seamless metal surface with a keypad and what looked like an old-fashioned biometric reader beside it, thin, with a vertical slit. I stared at it for what felt like minutes. Then I knocked. Nothing. I pressed my hand against the slit. Nothing. I tried to go back to work, but the door wouldn't leave me. It stayed in my thoughts like an afterimage burned into my vision. I found myself drawing it on napkins, sketching it on the corners of reports. That night, I dreamed I was inside it. The hallway was cold, white, no lights, but I could see, like the air glowed faintly. There were shadows moving along the walls that didn't match my body. When I turned around, the door was gone. The next morning, Carol wasn't at her desk. Her chair was pushed back like she'd left in a hurry. Her computer was on. And a cup of coffee sat untouched next to a folder marked RDA-REINSTATED. I wasn't supposed to see that label, but I did. Inside were 5 case files, all fresh. 2025, the most recent dated just 5 days prior. The names? One of them was Mara Kraus. She was an old friend, someone I hadn't seen since college. We'd dated for a few months. I hadn't thought about her in years. She'd disappeared hiking near Jasper. I remembered the story. Social media campaigns, news coverage, even a GoFundMe for the search team. It was national news for a week, then vanished. I checked the file. Witnesses claimed they saw her walking with a man who looked like he was wearing her skin, but wrong. One even said the figure had no pupils, just wide, golden yellow irises like polished glass. RDA protocol had been activated within 36 hours of her going missing. There was a final note. Full integration probable. Agency recommends Class 5 deflection strategy. Close peripheral contacts pending review. I didn't understand what that meant, but something told me I was a peripheral contact. That's when I started noticing the man in the blue jacket. At first, I thought he was just another commuter. He stood near the same bus stop I used, always looking at his phone. Never said a word. But then he showed up at the corner deli where I got my coffee. Stood 2 people behind me in line, didn't order anything. Then he was at the park where I jogged, sitting on a bench. Same jacket, same stillness. One day I looped around the block to test him. Took an alley shortcut. Crossed streets at random. He followed, not directly, never close, but just enough to stay in sight, like he wanted me to know he was there. I confronted Carol the next day. "What's going on with the RDA files?" I asked. She froze. "I saw the folder," I said. "I saw Mara's name." Carol stared at me for a long time. Her voice, when it came, was softer than I'd ever heard it. "You've gone too far, Jake." "What is this place? What do the protocols mean? Who's watching me?" She glanced around the office, lowered her voice. "This floor isn't just records. It's a filter. We don't solve disappearances. We curate the ones they let us remember. The RDA isn't a code. It's an agreement between them and the ones below." "Them?" She didn't answer. "Carol," I whispered, "are you saying—" "They're real," she said flatly, "and they walk among us." I'll never forget what she told me next. The disappearances, they aren't accidents. They're extractions, replacements. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to keep a balance. Enough to keep the illusion. I asked her who was behind it. Her eyes didn't blink. They are, and they always have been. Who are they? She handed me a slip of paper with a street address scrawled in pencil. "Go here, tonight. Don't bring your phone. If you don't go, you'll be next." I stared at the address. It wasn't far. She leaned in one last time. "And Jake, if you ever see your reflection blink the wrong way, don't look again." I thought I was losing my mind. That's the part people never talk about when they stumble across something they weren't supposed to see. Not the fear, not the danger, not even the conspiracy. It's the quiet, soul-numbing uncertainty. The sense that your memories are dissolving from the edges inward. That maybe, just maybe, you dreamed all of it, until something reminds you it's real. In my case, it was the paper. The address Carol gave me was written in dull graphite pencil on yellowed lined paper that looked like it had been torn from a school notebook. Not typed, not digital, not even ink. Something about it felt ancient, impermanent, like it would fade if left in the sun too long. I stared at it for hours. I wasn't even sure I was going to go. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe it was part of the job. A psych eval to see how far I'd go. But the more I looked at that scrap, the more I felt something else. Something deeper, like a signal, a pull. And so, against every instinct I had left, I went. The house was in Burnaby, tucked along a ridge road that no GPS would guide you to. I had to park 2 blocks away and walk uphill in the dark. The street lamps grew further apart the closer I got. The air was thick with cedar and something else, something sour. I reached the address around 9:20 p.m. The house was wrong, not in any obvious way. It was just a standard two-story Victorian, maybe built in the 40s. Wood siding, peaked roof, warped porch railings. But the way it sat against the land, the angle of its windows, the texture of the paint, none of it seemed stable. Like it was imitating a house but didn't fully understand how houses worked. There were no cars out front, no lights in the windows, but I could see shadows move inside. I knocked once. No answer. I waited, about to turn and leave, when the door opened on its own. Just a few inches, enough to show the hallway beyond. Yellow light, dust motes floating. No sound. I stepped inside. The floor creaked like it remembered different weight. There was no furniture, just stacks of books, hundreds of them, piled waist-high across the floor in every room. Journals, ledgers, technical manuals, and all of them handwritten, all in the same strange looping script I didn't recognize. Then a voice spoke from the kitchen. "You're late." He looked like he hadn't slept in years. Late 70s, maybe 80s. Wispy silver hair like smoke off an old candle. Eyes like jet, deep, matte black with no light reflection. He wore a wool sweater over an old work shirt, and his hands shook constantly, as though something inside him was still vibrating from another world. "You're Carol's replacement," he said, not asking. "Replacement?" He didn't answer, just motioned for me to sit. I stayed standing. "My name is Halen," he said. "Former intake, liaison handler, and breach recorder. Last active clearance level, Black Echo." I just stared at him. He sighed. "You don't know what that means yet. That's fine. They designed the system that way. Compartmentalized, layered, fractured." I asked him what the hell was going on, what any of this was. He nodded toward one of the book piles. "Tell me what you found so far." I told him everything. About the RDA files, the disappearances, the reptilian sightings, the people I knew whose names showed up in the folders, the man in the blue jacket, the door in the archive room. I watched his face carefully. Not a flicker of surprise, not a twitch of doubt. He just listened. And when I finished, he said something I still hear in my sleep. "Good. That means they've started letting you remember." "Letting me?" He nodded. "They don't erase the truth. That's a myth. Too expensive, too dangerous. Instead, they control when you remember. For how long? They let your brain build the walls, and then they just decide when to open the windows." "I didn't understand," he continued. "The agency you work for isn't real. Not in the way you think. It was created as a membrane, a filter, a middle ground between them and us. We file reports, stamp dates, push papers in circles. But the real work, that happens below." "Below what?" He looked down at the floor. "They live beneath us, Jake. Not metaphorically, physically. Entire cities, carved through stone and magma and layers of time we can't measure. They've been here longer than we've had words. Some say longer than the continents themselves." I tried to laugh, but I couldn't. "You mean reptilian aliens?" He tilted his head. "Aliens? That's the cover story. They're not from out there. They're from here. We just arrived after them, stumbled in, set up our little towns and tech, and pretended we understood the rules." He stood, slow and aching. "You think evolution is a straight line? You think we're the top of it? We're the latest tenant. That's all. But the landlords never left." I asked him what they wanted. He looked out the window, at nothing. Stability, control, silence, sometimes replication. I didn't ask what that meant. I was afraid I already knew. Instead, I asked him the only question that mattered. Why the disappearances? He turned back to me with eyes that seemed more lizard than man. Because sometimes a human sees too much. Sometimes they make noise. Sometimes they start to remember. And sometimes they're chosen. Chosen for what? For integration, he said. Before I could ask more, the lights flickered. Halen stiffened. They're close, he whispered. You shouldn't have stayed this long. I moved toward the door. Wait. What do I do now? What am I supposed to do? He looked at me like he'd seen this exact moment before. Choose your next step very carefully. From this point on, you'll only be given two options: forget or vanish. They'll offer you comfort, a way back into normal life. But that comfort is a lie. It's a shell over your mind. And if you let them build it, you'll never wake up again. Outside, something scraped across the roof. The air shifted, warped. The books on the floor trembled slightly, barely perceptible, but enough to feel in my feet. I opened the door and stepped into the night. The last thing I saw in the window was Halen turning off every light in the house, one by one. Then, darkness. I walked home. The streets looked different now, too symmetrical, too quiet. The shadows had corners where there shouldn't be any. And the man in the blue jacket was waiting at the bus stop across from my apartment. Just standing. Still, watching. They say paranoia is just pattern recognition without permission. I used to roll my eyes at that kind of thing. Used to think people who chased conspiracies were just looking for meaning in chaos. Something to blame. Something to fear that made more sense than randomness. But after the night at Halen's house, something inside me changed. No, not changed. Activated. Like a file in my brain had been unzipped, and now everything looked different. It started with mirrors. The next morning, I stood in my bathroom, brushing my teeth like always. Nothing felt off at first. Then I turned off the light, opened the medicine cabinet, and caught the tail end of something. A delay. Just half a second. A fraction of time between when I moved and when the reflection followed. I froze, stared, lifted my right hand slowly, watching the glass. My reflection mirrored me perfectly. Nothing unusual. But that one moment, it had happened. I knew it had. And then I remembered what Carol said. If you ever see your reflection blink the wrong way, don't look again. I shut the cabinet and didn't open it again for days. At work, I tried to act normal. My desk still had the same files. My name still logged into the same network. Carol wasn't there, on leave, they said, but her desk had been cleaned out completely. A new woman, younger and with an eerily symmetrical smile, had taken her place. She introduced herself as Julia. Never blinked during the entire conversation. Even the building felt different now. The walls seemed more angled, the lighting too dim, or maybe too bright. Sounds echoed wrong. I could hear things from floors above, scrapes, murmurs, things that vibrated up through the foundation and into the soles of my shoes. Then the files changed. No more red folders. No RDA stamps. Just generic reports. Old, stale, sanitized. It was like they were testing me, watching to see how I'd react to the sudden shift. So I played along, but at night, I went deeper. I started noticing reflections everywhere, not just in mirrors, in windows, puddles, computer screens. And each time, something felt off. Sometimes it was a micro-expression that didn't belong. Sometimes my reflection didn't breathe in sync with me. And once, in the freezer door of my refrigerator, I swear I saw myself blink vertically. Just once. A second lid, a membrane, like a lizard. That's when I started doing the reflection test. Every morning and night, I'd sit in front of a mirror with a small flashlight and a notepad. I'd test angles, eye dilation, blink speed, movement synchronicity. It became a ritual, and each time I convinced myself I passed. Barely. But the fear wasn't that I'd fail. The fear was that I already had, and I just didn't know it yet. The man in the blue jacket never left. Sometimes he was outside my building, sometimes across the street at the diner, sometimes parked in a gray sedan 2 blocks away. He never followed me closely, never confronted me, just observed. I began to wonder if he was protecting me or cataloging me. Then, one night, I saw him talking to my neighbor, Mrs. Albrecht. Sweet old lady. Fed the crows every morning. She was smiling, laughing. Then he handed her something, a silver badge the size of a coin. The next day her apartment was empty. No U-Haul, no goodbye, nothing. Her mail kept arriving for 3 weeks. I stopped sleeping. Every noise felt like an intruder. Every silence felt like a setup. I took to sleeping on the floor behind my couch, with blackout curtains drawn and white noise playing. Even then, I'd wake up to find my closet door open or my hallway light flicked on. I changed the locks twice. It didn't help. They didn't need doors. One night, I decided to push back, to test them. I'd been reading through Halen's notebooks, handwritten pages, hundreds of them, all describing techniques the agency, or whatever it really was, used to detect subsurface alteration. There were entries labeled facial repetition loops, sleep phase interrogation, and one called the mirror box. It described a simple experiment. Sit in complete silence, face a mirror, set a metronome to 60 beats per minute. Ask yourself aloud the following: Am I alone in this body? Repeat until the reflection hesitates. I didn't want to try it, but I did. It was 3:12 a.m. I lit 2 candles, turned off every other light in the apartment, set the metronome on my phone and placed it beside the mirror on my kitchen table. The ticking began. I stared into my own eyes. Tick. Am I alone in this body? Tick. Am I alone in this body? Tick. I repeated the phrase 27 times. Each time, my reflection copied me perfectly, until the 28th. That time, I said the words, but the lips in the mirror didn't move. They just smiled. Software, crooked, inhuman. I shoved the mirror off the table. It shattered. The smile was gone. The next morning, I found a red envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single card with bold type: "You are invited to reintegration. Proceed to level -3. Bring nothing." There was a small symbol at the bottom, a spiral made of scales, like a snake consuming itself. Level -3. Our office building had 5 floors. I had never seen a sub-basement, no button for it, no directory, no mention in any of the security paperwork. But I knew exactly where it was, that hidden door in the archives, the one with the biometric slit, the one that had once clicked open when no one was near. I waited 3 nights. Then I went back. It was just past midnight when I entered the building. My badge still worked, surprisingly. The 5th floor was dark, silent, abandoned. The air felt heavier, thicker. The humming from the walls was deeper now, almost like breathing. I walked to the archive room. The door was waiting. Still metal, still unmarked. But now, the slit beside the keypad glowed faintly blue. I placed my hand on it. This time, it opened. The hallway beyond wasn't what I expected. No fluorescent lights, no security guards, just smooth, obsidian black walls that pulsed faintly like skin. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. No turning back. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I couldn't name. Not fear, not dread, not awe. Just a sense of home, like I'd been here before. The hallway curved. That was the first thing I noticed. Not a right angle in sight. No square corners. Just smooth, sweeping bends like the interior of something living. The walls weren't drywall or concrete. They were warm to the touch, barely perceptible heat, like the skin of an animal sleeping just beneath the surface. There were no seams, no wires, no vents, only faint pulses in the walls that throbbed every few seconds, as if timed to a heartbeat too large to comprehend. The light came from above, not from bulbs, but from the ceiling itself, a bioluminescent glow, softly undulating between deep amber and slate blue. It made my skin look unfamiliar, made my thoughts feel thinner. I walked. I don't know for how long. There was no sense of time in level -3, no clocks, no movement except mine. Even the air felt unmoored, neither stale nor fresh but heavy, like it had passed through other lungs before reaching mine. And all the while, that scent lingered. Warm metal, old circuitry. A dry sweetness, like petrified sap. The same scent I'd noticed on my very first day. I turned a corner and found the first symbol, etched into the wall in a kind of low-relief carving, barely visible, almost shy. A spiral pattern, but angular. Not smooth like a nautilus, but sharpened. Geometric. Snake-like, but not natural. Something designed. There was a hum behind it. Not sound, but vibration. Low frequency. It moved through my ribs. I placed my hand on the spiral. The wall shuddered, only slightly, and then opened. Not like a door, like an aperture, a dilation. And I stepped through. The chamber was circular, no furniture, no screens, no obvious purpose, except for the floor. It was covered in mirrors. Not glass, something else. Something darker. Reflective, yes, but shifting. Like it responded to thought, not light. I knelt. My reflection did not mimic me. It stared back. Blank expression. Eyes wide, but not afraid. Just watching. Waiting. Then its mouth moved. Not mine. Its words formed, silent but unmistakable. This is the part where you ask who you really are. I stumbled backward, but the room didn't let me fall. The walls softened behind me, guiding me upright again. The mirror floor rippled, and the images began. I saw myself, as a child, playing in the woods behind my childhood home, 8 years old, alone. But I wasn't watching from the outside. I was inside that memory, smelling the pine needles, feeling the wet leaves underfoot. Then something shifted. A shape behind the trees, tall, thin, reflective skin like oil on water. It didn't move, just watched. I never remembered that. Not until now. Flash. Now I was 16, camping with my Uncle Patrick. We were roasting marshmallows when he went to relieve himself behind a ridge. He never came back. They told me he must have gotten lost, or attacked by a bear. But now, I saw the truth. He didn't disappear. He was taken by something that rose silently from the creek, pulled him into the dark, and wore him. Flash. Now I was 23, in a government testing center, volunteering for a research study. I thought it was for sleep disorders, but it wasn't. They showed me images, flashing too fast to register consciously. Subterranean diagrams, glyphs, reptilian eyes. That's when the migraines started. That's when I stopped remembering my dreams. I stumbled out of the chamber, sweat pouring down my face, mouth dry. My own heartbeat felt foreign, too slow, too even. The hallway beyond had changed. It was darker now, narrower, like the building was adjusting itself. I turned a corner, and that's when I saw them. 3 of them, standing, waiting, tall, easily 7 feet. Their skin was patterned like wet granite, shifting slightly with every breath. Eyes golden and vertical, hands with too many joints. But the strangest part? They weren't hiding. Not from me. They were expecting me. The center one stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice was not sound. It was sensation. It arrived in my spine and blossomed outward like pressure in a diving bell. You have passed the memory lattice. Another stepped forward. The integration has begun. The others have been notified. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. A third raised a hand. Do not fear. Your continuity will be maintained. The interface is already familiar. Interface? I finally managed a whisper. Am I human? They tilted their heads, not mockingly, just curiously, like I'd asked what color the wind was. You are an echo of continuity, a bridge function, a recompiler. I shook my head. I don't understand. You will, in the forgetting. That's when the wall behind them opened, a perfect circle. Fluid like water, but humming like electricity. Beyond it, I saw not another hallway, but a city, underground, impossible. Towers of bone and crystal, lights without bulbs, roads that flowed like mercury, shapes too vast to be understood. And at the center, a mirror the size of a stadium, reflecting nothing, just waiting. One of them turned to me again. Your options are thus: remain above and dissolve in fragments of fear, or return below and become whole once more. I stepped back, felt my memories spinning. The files, the reflections, the door, Carol's warning, Helen's final words, my uncle's eyes in the firelight. I ran. The tunnel didn't stop me, but I don't think I escaped. I don't think escape was ever part of it, because now I see them. Everywhere. Behind eyes on the train. In the symmetry of strangers. In the echoes of my own voice when I speak into silence. And most nights, I dream of the mirror city, calling, waiting. And the longer I stay away, the more I begin to wonder if I ever truly left. It's been 13 days since level -3. That's what the notes say, anyway. I've been writing dates in the margins of my journal, but they smear sometimes, even with ballpoint ink. Whole entries vanish when I look away. Not blank pages, just gone, like I wrote them in water. Time is soft now. It moves differently. It hiccups. It leans. Some mornings feel like déjà vu with more gravity, and sometimes I wake up in places I don't remember falling asleep. Always familiar places, but too clean, too symmetrical. I've stopped sleeping in beds. I drag a mattress into the bathroom now and block the door with a metal bar. No windows. One mirror, which I've turned around. Even so, I catch glimpses of myself on other surfaces, in the TV screen, the microwave door, my phone when it's off. And when I do, my reflection looks happy. Not smiling, happy. And that terrifies me more than anything. I thought I was alone in this, but I was wrong. It started with a flyer, taped to the inside of my mailbox on the inner wall. Someone had to open the box to leave it there. It read, "Do you see them too? Do the mirrors lie? Has someone you loved vanished with no explanation? We believe you." At the bottom was a location, an intersection in East Vancouver. No building listed, no time. Just a mark, a coil drawn like a labyrinth eating itself. I almost threw it out, but I didn't. I went at dusk. The address led to a laundromat, old signage, half the lights flickering. One broken window taped with plastic and cardboard. I stepped inside. There was a man behind the counter who didn't look up. He was watching static on a small portable TV. Not a program, just white noise. His hand twitched in rhythm with it. A woman with bleached hair nodded at me from the folding table and said one word, "Dryer." I turned. One of the machines was spinning with no clothes in it, no sound, just motion. I walked toward it. The door clicked open on its own. Inside, folded, was another note. "If you're not ready, you still have time. But not much. Meet us beneath the serpents. 2:13 a.m. There was no signature, only a thin smear of what looked like dried blood across the corner. At 2:10, I arrived at the address. It was a sculpture downtown, something I'd seen 100 times and never once questioned. A bronze installation in a plaza surrounded by office towers, two coiled snake-like forms rising and twisting around each other. "Urban DNA," the plaque said. I stood under it, waiting. At 2:13, exactly, the ground beneath the sculpture shifted, not visibly. I just knew. I walked forward, placing a hand on the base. A section of the ground hissed open, metal, silent, and impossibly thin. Beneath it, stairs. I descended. No one stopped me. The stairwell smelled of earth and static. The deeper I went, the less I felt like I was in a city. The air turned still, saturated, ancient. At the bottom, I found them. 7 people, sitting in a circle in what looked like an old subway tunnel lined with industrial plastic sheeting. Battery lanterns flickered. Hand-drawn maps lay scattered across crates. Thermoses, blankets, journals with bookmarks. One man looked up. "You're Jake," he said. It wasn't a question. They called themselves the Misaligned. Each had their own story. A woman named Ayla, who said her brother vanished in 2011 while sleepwalking. A man named Dev, whose twin had begun showing signs of reflection drift, minor inconsistencies, reversed habits, a laugh that no longer belonged. One girl, couldn't have been more than 19, said she hadn't seen her reflection in 4 years, not once. Every surface either blanked out, broke, or showed something she wasn't. They showed me a board with photos, red yarn, maps, government logos, journal clippings going back to 1952. At the center was the phrase, "Symmetry is a cage." And beneath it, handwritten, "What looks like balance is surveillance. What feels like order is containment." I told them about level -3, about Halen, about the spiral mirror, the beings. They didn't laugh. They didn't even flinch. Ayla handed me a drawing. It showed the exact mirror city. I stared at her. "You've seen it too?" She nodded. "In dreams, in migraines, in places I'm not sure I actually was." Then she tapped the edge of the paper. "It's not a place, Jake. It's a copy, a recursive structure. Every person marked by the RDA becomes part of it. Not physically, cognitively, psychologically." Dev chimed in. "They map us, echo us, rebuild us inside that mirror until the echo is louder than the source. And then, we're gone. Replaced, integrated, whatever word you want to use." They showed me how they resist. Cold showers, pattern breaking, mismatched clothing, music that skips, poetry with inverted stanzas, anything to break symmetry. Ayla said the reptilians hate imperfection. They thrive on predictability. "We're not hiding from them," she said. "We're refusing to mirror them." I stayed underground with them for 3 days. It felt like weeks. I slept better than I had in months. No reflections, no pulses in the wall, no smiles in the glass. But I knew I couldn't stay. I still had the key to something, a memory that wasn't mine, but felt like it belonged to someone important, someone who left a trail. Halen had spoken of a recompiler. What if that was me? What if I hadn't just stumbled into this? What if I had been sent? I left at midnight, with Ayla's warning in my ear. "When they come for you again, they won't be strangers. They'll wear the people you love." I returned to my apartment. The lights were on, all of them, even the hallway lamp I never used. I entered slowly. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. Nothing out of place, no dust. The table where I kept my files, wiped clean. The mirror I'd flipped around, now upright. I moved toward it and stopped. There was someone in my reflection, but not me. Not anymore. There's a moment, so brief you might miss it, when your body recognizes a lie before your mind does. A microsecond, a cellular shudder. That's what I felt as I stood in my apartment, staring at the reflection that wasn't mine. It looked like me. Same stubble, same tired eyes, same faint scar on the chin from when I fell off a bike at 12. But it wasn't me. It moved too smoothly, blinked too evenly. There was no micro-tension in the jaw, no quiet flutter of anxiety in the neck. It looked like the version of me I tried to project to the world. But real reflections always betray you. This one was rehearsed. And then it smiled. That perfect, tooth-symmetrical smile I'd seen in nightmares that hadn't even happened yet. I backed away from the mirror. It stayed put, didn't mimic the step, didn't flinch. It just watched. I ran to the bathroom, turned on the lights, slammed the mirror cabinet open. My face appeared. Or a face. Same problem. Too perfect. My face has always had tiny inconsistencies. One eyelid slightly heavier. A weird little dip in the upper lip. Subtle flaws that remind me I'm real. But here, everything aligned. Even the pores were symmetrical. I tapped the glass. The reflection blinked after I did, by a full beat. I punched the mirror. Glass exploded into the sink like shattered frost. Blood in my knuckles. A satisfying sting. But when I looked at the broken pieces, they still showed the wrong face, even in 20 different shards. I dropped to the floor, heaving. It was like I'd been erased, like something else had taken my place, one layer at a time, until only the shape remained. That night, I didn't sleep. I made a checklist instead. Things only I would know. My father's last words. The name of the girl I loved, but never told. What my childhood dog smelled like after rain. The first story I ever wrote. The sound my mother made when she was thinking. I wrote each one down on a scrap of paper and shoved them into a locked box under my bed. Like breadcrumbs for myself in case I lost the trail. And then I asked myself, what happens when he starts writing his own list? The next day, the world was quieter. Too quiet. I walked to the corner store. No birds, no wind. Even the streetlights seemed to pause between flickers. I passed people who smiled blankly, nodded too rhythmically, walked with just enough delay to feel choreographed. Was this what the misaligned had warned me about? A replacement wasn't just about a person. It was about reality, a slow substitution, one gesture at a time. At the store, I grabbed a drink, paid in cash, and asked the clerk, "Do I come in here often?" He blinked. "Pardon? Do you remember me? Do I come in often?" He looked me over uneasy. I don't think so. I'd been coming here every 3 days for the past year. He used to know my name. I left quickly. Every reflection in the glass doors tracked me a little too long. Every face on the street held an echo of mine. A jawline. An ear shape. Even the same cough. It was like the world was being overwritten with me as the template. But not the real me. The curated me. The version that fit. Back home, I found something under my door. A small flash drive. No label. Plugging it in was a risk. But at this point, everything was. It held one file, a video, 10 seconds long. Footage from a security camera, grainy, black and white. It showed me, or him, sitting at my desk at work. Same clothes, same posture, typing. But then he looked up directly at the camera, and his face shimmered. Like a mask of light had been placed over something else. Beneath it, for a fraction of a second, just one, was a face I couldn't describe. Not human, not even organic, just geometry, living geometry. And then it returned to my face. That was the moment I accepted the truth. They weren't replacing people. They were replacing presence, an essence, a pattern, a consciousness. They were not content with shadows. They wanted resonance. They wanted to be seen as us, so clearly and so widely that we couldn't remember what real ever looked like. That night, Ayla found me. Or rather, she called me. I didn't know how she had my number. Her voice was urgent. "They've mirrored you. Full shell. You need to come in. You can't stay topside anymore." "How long do I have?" "Hours. A day, at most." "What happens if I stay?" She was quiet for too long. And then, softly, "Then the world forgets the difference." I asked her one more thing before hanging up. "Have I already been replaced?" Her voice didn't tremble. "I don't know, Jake. That's the final test." "What is?" You either remember something they can't copy, or you don't. That night, I turned off every light in my apartment, lit a single candle, sat in front of the blacked-out window, and asked the reflection staring back at me, "What's my mother's voice sound like when she cries?" It didn't answer. It just kept smiling. I needed proof. Not for anyone else, just for myself. After what I saw in the mirror, after that smile with my face on it, I needed to know there was something left inside me that couldn't be copied. Something they couldn't simulate. Something they couldn't wear like a mask. Halen once said that the reptilians don't just replace us. They reassemble us, backwards, inside out, thought by thought, until even we forget we were ever someone else. That was the thought that scared me most, not being taken, but being rewritten so slowly that I mistook it for growth. I left the apartment and drove north. No destination. Just the hum of tires on wet pavement and a single phrase looping in my head. The memory they can't steal. I didn't know what it was yet, but I believed it existed. Somewhere beneath the digital noise, the missing people, the mirrored faces, and synthetic calm, there had to be something that still belonged only to me. Something analog. Something handmade. Something raw. I drove for 6 hours until I reached a town that barely qualified as one. Gravel shoulders, 2 gas stations, a church with a weathered white steeple leaning west, and just past the tree line, a cabin I hadn't seen in 27 years. I was 9 the last time I stood on that porch. It was my grandfather's place. He'd built it after the war with his own hands. Told stories by the fire about spirits in the woods and men with snake eyes who lived in tunnels under the mountains. We always thought it was nonsense. Old man war trauma or something picked up from cheap pulp paperbacks. But now I wasn't so sure. The cabin was abandoned, moss crawling up the steps, roof sagging, a half-burnt coffee can still sitting on the porch railing, rusted through. I pushed the door open. It moaned like it remembered my footsteps. Inside, it was all rot and shadow. But the bones were still there. The stove, the cot, the old map pinned to the wall with thumbtacks and curling edges. And in the far corner, behind a stack of firewood, the small wooden chest. I knew it instantly. My grandfather called it the archive. Said if anything ever happened to him, I was the only one allowed to open it. Back then, I thought he meant money, or photos, or his will. Now I knew better. The lock had rusted through. Inside was a leather-bound journal, dozens of loose Polaroids, and a folded note with my name written in pencil. Faint, shaky. Jake. I unfolded it with trembling hands. They came for me in '58. I said no. But they don't accept no. They wait. They build you, son, one cell at a time. By the time you feel different, it's too late to go back. But there's one thing they can't take. Not if you bury it deep enough. A memory they can't rewrite. Yours was the first time I saw the sky open. You were 2. I held you up over the fence line. You laughed, then pointed. Star came down. And you were right. It did. That night, they changed trajectory. For you. You mattered. I don't know why, but remember this, Jake. You saw it first, and they never forgave you for that. I sat there for hours, reading, flipping through the photos, most of them blurred, shaky, night vision. Eyes in the woods, shapes against the stars. A tunnel mouth carved into rock. One Polaroid just showed a blurry figure with my grandfather's silhouette standing in front of something that didn't cast a shadow. Then I found the final page of the journal. It was only 2 lines. If you're reading this, then they haven't finished you yet. That's when I knew what the memory was, the one they couldn't steal. It wasn't a moment. It was a witness. The act of having seen something before the story was written, before the copy was made, before they could explain it away. They could fake me. They could fake the people around me. But they could never fake the moment I saw the truth before they had time to control it. I left the cabin at dawn. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't lock the door. I drove back with a different kind of silence, one that didn't feel watched. And when I returned to the city, something had shifted. The reflections still watched me. But I didn't fear them now, because I carried something they couldn't touch. An origin they didn't write. You can't unsee the grid once you learn it exists. That's what Isla told me when I called her from the side of the highway. I'd just come down out of the mountains. No sleep. Still wired from what I found at my grandfather's cabin. The journal. The photos. The truth that had been hiding in my blood like a dormant seed. She didn't say much. Just one sentence. If you saw it before the copy, you're outside the echo. And then she gave me coordinates. No explanation. No warning. I didn't ask for either. I drove. The location was flat. Remote. Southern Alberta. The kind of place where the horizon folds into itself. Dust roads. Grain silos. Crickets you can hear from miles off. But the air felt wrong. Charged. The kind of wrong you don't notice until you get back in your car and the radio's playing a station that doesn't exist. At the end of a gravel road, I found a gate. Unmarked. Electrified. Just a red circle painted on the post. No text. Beyond it, nothing visible but wheat and sky. But the coordinates led underneath. I parked in the ditch and walked. Ayla had said the entrance wouldn't look like an entrance. That was the point. So I scanned the landscape for what she called a falsity gap. And there it was. Not a door, not a hatch, just a patch of wheat that didn't move with the wind. I stepped into it. The sound stopped. Suddenly I was standing in a concrete shaft, just like that. No transition, no flash of light. One step and the world changed like a slide in a presentation. My ears rang. The air had a cold pulse to it, like a ventilator deep underground. The walls were seamless concrete, stamped with symbols I didn't recognize. Combinations of triangles, split circles, and that same spiraled serpent design. At the far end was a narrow tunnel, lit only by a string of flickering bulbs that stretched into darkness. A handprint panel waited beside the entrance. I didn't hesitate. I placed my palm on the pad. It was warm, alive, and it opened. Inside was not a facility. Not exactly. It was more like a machine that had grown around itself. Organic, mathematical, bone-white structures fused with mechanical tubing, columns that pulsed like veins, and in the center of it all, a sphere, floating, black as oil and twice as reflective. This was it, the echo core. Ayla told me later that it was a signal amplifier, a field projector. The reptilians didn't need to replace everybody. They only needed to create enough echo to drown the original. Reality was a balance of signal strength. And the echo core was their transmitter. I walked toward it. The moment I crossed the perimeter, something inside me folded. Not broke, folded, like memory itself was bending around a center. Suddenly, I was everywhere I'd ever been, all at once. My childhood bedroom, the park bench where I first kissed someone, my father's funeral. Level -3, the mirror, the tunnel, the sky above the cabin. Every moment played across the black sphere like holograms submerged in ink. You are the deviation. I didn't hear it. I felt it. The voice came from inside the sphere. Your memory is unindexed. Your thoughts are nonlinear. You are outside the permitted waveform. I stepped closer. I know who I am. That is your flaw. I reached into my pocket, the Polaroid of my grandfather, standing in front of the shadow that cast no shadow. I held it up to the sphere. You can't echo what's never been processed. The sphere pulsed, then cracked. Not like glass, but like silence breaking. The room buckled. Lights strobed red. The perimeter began to collapse, not structurally, existentially. The echoes started to flicker. Voices of people I knew, loved, lost, glitched in and out of focus around me. Not ghosts, not hallucinations, just recordings that had been pretending to be real. The copy of me flickered in the reflection one last time. He looked afraid. Not because I'd defeated him, but because I'd remembered something he never could. Ayla met me in the exit corridor. She was bruised, bloody, but smiling. You destabilized it. I didn't mean to. No, she said, but that's why it worked. I asked her what would happen next. She didn't answer right away. Then finally. The perimeter was the signal range. They can't reach beyond it now. They'll either come up to correct the pattern or collapse inward. I asked if that meant it was over. She laughed, quiet and bitter. Number it means we have to choose now. Choose what? She looked up at the surface hatch glowing above us. If we keep remembering or start rebuilding. Back on the surface, the wind moved again. The sky felt heavier, realer. But the world looked different. Too many things were back in place. People I hadn't seen in years were suddenly texting. Buildings that were under construction had mysteriously finished. Voicemails from people I didn't remember calling. The simulation was recalibrating, trying to convince me I'd never left. But I had. I was outside the echo. And now I had to live with what that meant. It's strange what you start to miss after stepping outside the echo. The streetcar hum. A stranger's laugh on a park bench. The sound of your name spoken by someone who doesn't want anything. After I left the echo perimeter, the world didn't end, but it didn't welcome me back either. It was too smooth now, like a painting trying to convince me it was a window. I went back to my apartment. It wasn't mine anymore. My keys still worked, but everything inside was wrong. The books were in alphabetical order. The fridge had groceries I don't eat. A single red shirt hung in the closet, folded in a way I never folded anything. The bed was made, and the mirror in the hallway was clean, spotless, like it had never been touched. And yet, it was me in the pictures on the shelf. Birthday parties I never attended. A hiking trip I never took. Smiling beside people I don't know. All dated, all printed, all perfectly believable. The man who used to be me had continued without me. Or maybe he had always been running in parallel. A copy left behind to smooth out the wrinkles I'd created. To make the world forget I ever deviated. But something was missing in him. A weight behind the eyes. A wrinkle in the voice. I could feel it whenever I caught a broadcast, or a friend texted me something they thought I'd said but I hadn't. It was like the simulation had a stand-in, and no one noticed the difference. Except me. And Ayla. She found me again a week later. Out near the reservoir, where the power lines hum louder than they should. She walked up wearing a hoodie, no makeup, mud on her boots. Looked tired, looked real. "You've been quiet," she said. I nodded. "Doesn't feel like my voice belongs here anymore." She sat beside me. Lit a cigarette she didn't smoke. "Most of the misaligned have gone underground again," she said. "Some scattered, others trying to find new root mirrors. The signal may be weaker, but it's not gone. Is it ever?" She smiled without joy. "There's always someone listening." I asked her if there were others like us, people who'd made it outside the perimeter, who hadn't been rewritten. She pulled something from her pocket, a folded list, just names, about 30. Many crossed out. One by one they either fade or forget. Forget what? That they ever made it out. That night I wandered through the city. It was too bright, too neat. Every bus arrived on time. Every store had perfect stock. Every building looked slightly newer than it should have. Reality had tightened. Less noise, fewer variables. At one point, I passed a cafe window and saw myself sitting inside, smiling, laughing with someone I didn't recognize. Same jacket, same haircut, same scar on the chin. But he didn't see me, because that version of me wasn't looking anymore. Ayla said something before we parted. Not everyone gets replaced. Some choose it. Some people don't want to carry the weight of remembering. Some people want the copy more than the truth. I think about that now. A lot. Because the ones that stayed behind, they weren't all taken. Some stayed because the echo is easier. It's smoother, painless, predictable. You wake up, go to work, smile, watch shows, sleep. No gaps, no questions. And the best part? You never remember you forgot anything. But I remember. And that memory burns like a flare in a night sky no one else can see. I see the mirrors, the flickers, the way shadows curve wrong in alleyways. I see the static in conversations that skip half a beat. And I see the people who don't blink enough, or blink too much. I see the watchers, the placeholders, the smooth ones, the ones who never sweat, never stutter, never say the wrong thing at the wrong time, the ones who used to be you. So now I walk, city to city, back road to back road, looking for anomalies, people like me, people whose memories don't match the reality they've been given, people who have glimpsed the shape behind the world. Sometimes I find them. More often I don't. But when I do, I tell them the truth. You're not broken. You're real. And that's why they're watching you. Somewhere, deep underground, the core may still pulse. Somewhere, beneath our cities, the old cities still breathe. Somewhere, in the glass, a version of you may be smiling. But if you've ever paused mid-sentence, forgotten your own name for a second, woken up, and not recognized your own voice, then maybe, just maybe, you've already slipped through. And if that's true, welcome. You're not alone. You're just outside the echo, It's been 11 years since I walked out of the Echo. I say that with some hesitation, not because I doubt the number, but because I no longer trust how time works here. Not entirely. Some years feel like fog. Others, like I live them in fast forward, skipping over birthdays, news, winters. People ask what I do now. I tell them I freelance in data cleaning, remote archival work, boring stuff. It keeps the questions away. People like simple answers. They don't want to hear about cities beneath the crust of the earth or reflections that learn to smile before you do. But the truth is, I travel. Not for work, not for vacation. I travel because I can still feel the perimeter moving. It's fainter now, not a wall, more like pressure, like a weather front coming in over the horizon of your nervous system. Every so often it gets closer, and when it does, I go. South, east, north. Doesn't matter. As long as I stay outside the Echo's reach. I live out of an old converted camper now. No electronics I don't trust, no mirrors, no screens. Just maps, paper journals, a lead-lined case under the floorboards that holds what's left of the misaligned archives. Ayla gave them to me before she vanished. We were close once. She used to say I was the last one who still remembered what the world was. Back before symmetry smoothed out the chaos. Back before people stopped getting sick or making mistakes in public. Back when real meant unpredictable. She said that's why the reptilians never fully succeeded. They underestimated the value of noise. Every so often I find someone like me. Someone who remembers something that no longer has context. A restaurant that never existed. A family member who vanished and returned. Different. A stretch of highway that used to have 3 overpasses, but now has none. I listen to them carefully. I never say too much. But before I leave, I always ask, do you trust your reflection? It's not about the answer. It's about how they answer. The pause, the breath, the flicker of doubt. That's when I know they still have a chance. The world has gotten stranger, not louder, not more violent, just sterile. Most people smile a little too long. They use phrases like, no worries, and all good, like their code. Everyone's home looks the same now. Air purified, light balanced, plants that don't die, fridges that suggest meals based on biometric readings. There's no dust anymore. Even the moon seems less textured. Everything's curated. And if you ask someone where they were the day before yesterday, half of them can't quite say. Sometimes I wonder what happened to the original me, the one I saw laughing in cafes. Did he fade? Or is he still out there playing the role so well he forgot it was a role? Would I even recognize him now? Or worse, would he recognize me? A few months ago, I returned to the place it all began, the Liaison Building. It's still there, in form, but the name's changed again. Now it's a digital services oversight facility. Glass facade, artificial plants in the lobby, a digital receptionist that blinks too rarely. I walked around the block 4 times. On the 5th, I saw someone watching me from the 5th floor window. For a moment, I thought I saw Carol. But she didn't wave. She just placed her hand against the glass. Palm first, like a signal or a goodbye. I still have the old records, the Benson file, the Weller transcript, a few of the red folders that somehow never degraded. Paper like that should yellow, but it doesn't. Sometimes I wonder if the ink was ever really ink. Maybe they weren't documenting the past. Maybe they were writing the present, as it happened. Turning life into a ledger so it could be managed. filed, and corrected. Lately, I've felt the signal growing faint, not defeated, but dispersed. They don't need the mirrors anymore. They have us, the watchers, the willing, the ones who lean into the curated world because it's comfortable, safe, predictable, no shadows, no noise. But I still remember what Ayla said to me the last time we met. Reality is only safe when it's slightly broken. If it works too well, it's no longer for you. So I keep my world broken. I wear mismatched socks. I hum songs I never finish. I rearrange the kitchen drawers every Sunday, not because it's necessary, but because it's human. Because chaos is the last territory they can't fully map. And as long as I keep walking crooked, they'll never be able to follow straight. If you're hearing this, if you're reading it, or dreaming it, or remembering it, it means there's still signal beyond the pattern. It means the memory they couldn't steal survived. So don't run. Just refuse. Don't blend. Just fracture. And if one day you catch your reflection lagging half a second behind you, smile. Because it means you're still you, and that means they still haven't won.